Whenever a company reaches out to me asking me to review their speakers, I always try to go for the top of the line, floor standing version. I know it's more trouble, it's heavy to bring a floor standing speaker into my room, but even though my head tells me you should go for the stand mount because they're lighter, my heart always wants to try the floor standing version. It's because I prefer floor standing speakers. They tend to have a bigger sense of scale. Bass is stronger with them. Now you can argue, Thomas, just get a subwoofer, get a stand mount speaker. But you know what? Bass, I like to hear it coming from the main speaker. Subwoofer, for me, they should disappear in my room. I should not hear them. They're there just to add information in the lower bass region. So for that reason, I prefer a floor standing speaker. Emotiva. When they reached out to me, I asked for the T2 Plus, the top of the line. And I was excited about it because it has two 8-inch woofer. I was like, damn it, man, I'm gonna have a party with these speakers. So you can imagine my surprise when I first powered up. I'm like, oh, they went for that kind of voicing? Really? In a speaker that is only $1,000? All right, guys, so let's talk about the Emotiva T2 Plus today. Let me put up the specs here on screen. Now the T2 Plus is only $999. For that money, with this kind of build quality and this level of performance, yeah, it's definitely very good value. There are a few things that caught my attention regarding the specs. 91 dB, and it's rated at 4 ohms. Now this is important in the sense that you better make sure your amplifier can handle a 4 ohm load. And finally, it's only 60 pounds. Man, I'm so used to speakers that are 100 pounds. When I saw 60 pounds, I'm like, yes, I don't have to break my back bringing in these speakers. Now, given the fact that there are already a few videos out there on these Emotiva speakers, as well as the other speakers from its line, I don't want to spend too much time going into detail. So I'm going to omit a lot of things, since I bet for those of you who bought the speakers already, or for those of you who want to buy the speakers, you probably saw all those videos 5 times over already. Instead, I'm just going to focus on what I like about it and what you should be careful when you buy this speaker. So let's talk about how it sounds. This is a bright speaker. Top end is tilted up, it is extended, its detail is airy. The lower treble, maybe upper mid, there's a hint of dryness there. I would say the mid-range is neutral, it's clean. The bass is where it's a bit interesting because this is the part where I go like, yeah, it's not a V curve. Usually there's a slight exaggeration somewhere in the bass region. Not with this one. You can call it neutral, you can call it linear, whatever you want. But when I listen to it, I feel that there's a lot of information, there's a lot of texture in the bass region. And I'll come back to that a bit later. The singer in the middle is really focused. Soundstage is wide, and the off-axis response is really good. Now, when it comes to dynamic, this is the part where there's a difference when you listen to music and watch movies with it. It can be very dynamic when you watch movies. Explosions, it can gently vibrate my floor. But when you listen to music, because there's no bump in the bass region, it doesn't feel as dynamic as, let's say, other speakers that I've tried with big woofers. Okay. Usually at this point, I'll talk about the negative and then I'll move on to the positive. But in this case, I'm going to combine them together. At $1,000, I don't find it having any negative because its weakness is also its strength and vice versa. So the top end is extended, airy, and detailed. I just described the Focal 1008 with beryllium tweeter, the Monitor GX300 with ribbon tweeter that's made of, I think, ceramic and magnesium, and also the Emotiva T2 Plus. 3 different speakers, 3 different tweeters. So even though they're open, airy, and detailed, their presentation do differ a little bit. I have a bit of experience with folded ribbon. I mean, the other speakers I heard, for example, is like the Golden Year 2. So whenever I listen to folded ribbon tweeter, one thing I notice when I compare it to, let's say, the beryllium tweeter, is that it's a little bit less open and it sparkles a little bit less. And also, folded ribbon, I find them a little bit dry, relatively speaking, to the Beryllium tweeter. In this case, I meant a shorter reverberation time. So that ding sound tends to drop off faster than, let's say, a Beryllium tweeter. These three speakers are bright speakers. You have to like bright speakers to be able to appreciate the T2 Plus. Sure, I mean, you can point it forward to deal with the brightness a little bit, but make no mistake about it, it is a bright speaker. Now, an email I get all the time is, Thomas, I want a speaker that has a lot of detail, but I'm sensitive to listening fatigue. I don't want to get tired. And this is tough. It's difficult, right? You want detail, and yet you don't want to tolerate bright, sharp speakers. I would say maybe the folded ribbon is your answer. I notice that with folded ribbon, there's less rough edges with it, if I can describe it that way. There's no ringing problem. There's not the same kind of zing as, let's say, a metal tweeter like a Beryllium tweeter. So it tends to hurt my ears less, relatively speaking. And as a result, I can actually point the Emotiva to me directly, and I'll still be fine. So maybe that's one reason why you can consider the T2 Plus, that you want a bright detail speaker, but you want within the family of bright speakers, the least chance of getting listening fatigue. And also because it's not as quote-unquote sharp, I noticed that relatively speaking, it tends to draw less attention to the tweeter relative to the other speakers that I talk about. So that's another advantage of it. Now, the second thing you have to be aware of is the bass. Now, the reason why I want to emphasize on this is because if you watch other review, everybody said the bass is strong, it's powerful, it's punchy. Yeah, it's true, especially if you watch movies with it. But it's not exaggerated bass. When there's no bump in the bass, when it's voiced like this, for those of you who are coming from, let's say, a normal mild V-curve voicing, you're going to find it lacking bass. This is what I call quality bass, but not quantity bass. It reminds me of the ELAC FS249 I had before, even the Concept 500, the Q Acoustic that I have right now. That's why I say I'm very surprised that they voice it this way, because usually you find this kind of voicing in higher end speakers where the focus is on getting the most information in the bass region, nuanced, detailed bass, and they went for that with this. So wow. And this is great for music because you get a lot of information in the bass area, but because they're very punchy when it comes to movies, I say that it's almost like best of both worlds, good for music and good for movies. Now please do buy 4 subwoofers to go with it if you want to have the full experience of movies. I recently made this video on the BC Acoustique EX214. When I pair it with these Emotiva and I turn on the loudness button, man, I can feel the floor gently vibrating. So they can deliver serious amount of bass. It's just that they voice it to not over exaggerate it. For those of you who have this speaker, if you can borrow an EX214, you should try it with the EX214. Alright, so I'm going to wrap it up at this point. I can understand for some people this speaker will blow them away, especially for people who have never heard speakers voiced like this. If all your life you've been hearing speakers with a mild V curve, and then you come to a speaker like this that has a lot of information in the bass region, it might actually be a big shock for you. Now, for those of you who follow me, you know I'm more of a V-curve kind of guy. I like slight exaggeration in the bass, but yet I can still appreciate the T2 Plus a lot. Now, I think that it's good for somebody who's looking for a speaker for both music and movies. And I'll give you one more thing to think about before we close. Now, listening fatigue. Usually we think about it because it's too bright or too sharp on the top end, right? Now, as I mentioned, this is a bright speaker, but within the family of bright speakers, you probably have less chance of getting listening fatigue with it because there's no rough edges with the tweeter. Now, please do put in the comment section if you disagree, because, I don't have a lot of experience with folded ribbon, just maybe 2 or 3 speakers. Another thing that we don't think about when we talk about listening fatigue is the bass. In my video on the Focal Pro 2, I mentioned one of the issues I had with it was that it over pressurized my room. fantastic bass, great detail top end, but I got listening fatigue because it pressurized my eardrums that it gets uncomfortable. So when I listen to that speaker, I have to open up the doors to let energy escape. And even then, with the T2 Plus, you won't have that problem. So maybe for some people who have quote unquote a smaller room, this actually also might work for you. And the fact that you have, I think, a 30-day return period is another good reason for you to give it a try. So hopefully I gave you something to think about, and I'll see you next time.